Number 1, what is the rectangular form of the curve given by the parametric equations x equals t squared plus 5t minus 1 and y equals t plus 1? Okay, I'll show you multiple ways of doing this, but the 2 steps that we learned to do to solve this algebraically is 1, you solve for what is shared, solve for shared variable. So I'm just going to say solve for shared. And if it was trig, you would solve for the trig. This one's not, so this one will solve for the shared t. And then 2, you substitute. These are our 2 steps if you're going to do it by hand. Now I'm looking at the answer choices, and the last answer choice is going to be x equals. So I'm going to take the y equation and plug it in over here, so I'll end up with x equals. Now we first need to find out what t equals. So to get that, I just subtract by 1 on both sides, and I find out that y minus 1 is equal to t. Now I'm going to take this, now that I've solved for the shared, which in this case was t. T is what was shared. And I'm going to substitute that into the other equation. This is now step 2. So I go x equals y minus 1 squared plus 5 times y minus 1 minus 1. I just substituted in for t from there. Now we need to work this out. Anytime you have a parenthesis squared, really what that means is that parenthesis is there twice. So it's y minus 1 times y minus 1. And I'll continue writing out the rest of the equation so we don't mess up here. So there's the rest of it. And so this is what x will equal. So let's start working this out. This first part, I need to do a FOIL, which means first times first. So there I would have y squared, and then outside times outside. So y times negative 1 is negative y. Inside times inside, so another negative y. And last times last, which is negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. Then I come over here, distribute. So I have plus 5y. This will be minus 5. And then at the end, I have this minus 1. So x should equal all of this. Now we'll put together our like terms. I see I have a positive 1 here, and a positive 1, and a negative 1. We'll simplify out. And so I have x equals y squared. Now notice I have a negative 1y, another negative y, so that's negative 2y's. But then I add 5y. So that would be positive 3y. It's kind of like saying I owe one person $1, I owe a second person $1, but I have $5. So if I settled my debts, I'd have $3 to my name. There's also this minus 5 out there. So this ought to be my equation. I look over, and it seems that C is my correct answer choice. Now, how could we do this without the calculator from the get-go? Is we could graph them and see if they were the right answer. So what I can do is I'll open up my graph, and I'm going to choose graph, menu, graph entry. That was given as a parametric equation, so I type in my equations. They were t squared plus 5t minus 1 for the x, and the y value was t plus 1. Now for this, I'm going to give some, if they don't give a time value, I put from negative 10 to positive 10. This usually gives us a pretty good representation of what the curve should look like. So I see it's a sideways parabola. Now I know it's a sideways parabola. What I can do is I can check my answers, but I'm going to go to menu, graph entry, and this time I'm going to choose equation, go to parabola, and we want a x equals. That was the form of all of our answers, and they weren't in vertex form, where the parenthesis with y squared. It was in standard form. And so we think the answer is C, which is 1y squared plus 3y minus 5. So 1y squared plus 3y minus 5. And so you just type it in like that. When I hit enter, I get the exact same graph. Since they're on top of each other, we did in fact find the right answer.